November 3rd, 1944. Ichinomiya Beach, coastal Honshu, Japan. The wind tears across the black sand as dawn breaks over the Pacific, carrying with it the salt spray and the weight of desperation. Major Teiji Takada stands motionless, his wool greatcoat snapping in the gale, watching as 300 soldiers and schoolgirls work in synchronized precision. Before them looms something that defies every convention of modern warfare. A translucent giant, 33 feet in diameter, swaying like a paper ghost against the gray November sky. This is no ordinary weapon. This is Fugo, the fire balloon, and it represents Japan's most audacious gamble of the Pacific War. The balloon's skin is mulberry paper, laminated in strips by the hands of thousands of Japanese schoolgirls in darkened factories across Honshu, their fingers coated in paste made from konnyaku root. 4 layers thick, treated with konnyaku to seal against the hydrogen that fills its enormous envelope. Suspended beneath the balloon's equator hangs a chandelier of death. 4 11-pound incendiary devices and one 33-pound anti-personnel bomb designed to shred anyone foolish enough to approach. But the true genius lies in the automatic ballast system, a mechanism so sophisticated it would not be out of place in a modern aircraft. Altitude sensors trigger the release of sandbag pairs every 2 hours, compensating for the hydrogen's natural cooling and contraction. When the balloon climbs too high, a pressure-activated valve bleeds hydrogen. The entire contraption is designed to ride the river of wind at 30,000 feet. The jet stream, a meteorological phenomenon the Japanese discovered and weaponized before the Americans even knew it existed. Takada checks his watch. In 40 minutes, the first wave launches. His orders come directly from the Imperial Japanese Army's 9th Technical Research Institute at Noborito, where scientists and engineers have spent years perfecting this concept. The strategic calculation is brutally simple. Launch 9,000 balloons across the Pacific. Let the jet stream carry them to North America in 3 days, and watch as the forests of Oregon, Washington, and California burn. 6,000 miles from Japan to the continental United States. No pilots, no fuel beyond the initial hydrogen, just paper, wind, and fire. The Americans, the planners believe, will panic. The psychological warfare value alone justifies the cost. A civilian population wondering when the next bomb might drift silently from the clouds, waiting to explode in a schoolyard or ignite a forest. The resources diverted to civil defense. The fear that Japan can strike the homeland at will. Takada watches as the ground crew attaches the final payload. The bomb cluster hangs on a 4-pointed shroud harness, swaying in the wind. A battery powers the altimeter. Fuses are set. The release mechanism, a masterpiece of clockwork and barometric pressure, is armed. In 70 hours, if all goes according to plan, this balloon will release its cargo somewhere over North America. Junbi Kanryo, The crew chief's voice cuts through the wind. Ready for launch. The securing ropes fall away. 300 hands release in unison. The Fugo rises, not with a roar, but with an eerie silence that makes Takada's chest tighten. A deep, steady narration, with a calm but commanding tone. Slightly gravelly, mature voice that carries the weight of wartime history. Clear, deliberate pacing, never rushed, allowing tension to build naturally. Subtle emotional restraint, controlled intensity during dramatic moments, quieter and reflective during tragic ones. Cinematic, documentary-style delivery, with precise emphasis on key names, dates, and actions. A voice that sounds authoritative, historical, and inevitable. It climbs faster than he expected, the hydrogen pulling it skyward with desperate urgency. Within minutes, it becomes a white speck against the iron clouds. Then it vanishes entirely, swallowed by the stratosphere. Behind Takada, 60 more balloons wait their turn. By nightfall, the beach will launch 200. Tomorrow, 200 more. Wave after wave, week after week, through the winter months when the jet stream runs strongest. 9,000 balloons. 9,000 chances to wound America where it believed itself invulnerable, at home. What Takada cannot know, standing on that wind-swept beach, is that this weapon will succeed in ways the Imperial Army never imagined. It will kill American civilians on continental soil, the only enemy action to do so during the entire war. It will start fires. It will sow confusion. But it will also become one of the war's most closely guarded secrets, a campaign so shrouded in mystery that even today, few remember the silent invasion that rode the winter wind across the Pacific. The Fugo is airborne. The war has come to America. November 4th, 1944, 2:47 p.m., USS Archer, 12 miles off San Pedro, California. Seaman First Class Peter Dumas squints through the salt haze, his binoculars sweeping the gray Pacific horizon on what should be a routine patrol. The destroyer Escort cuts through moderate swells, her diesels thrumming steadily beneath his feet. Then something catches his eye, a white shape bobbing in the water, too regular to be natural, too large to be debris from a downed aircraft. Sir, object in the water, bearing 320. His voice carries an edge that brings Lieutenant Commander James Wallace to the rail in seconds. Through the bridge telescope, Wallace sees it clearly now, a massive white envelope, partially deflated, trailing what appears to be rope and metal fixtures. His stomach tightens. In these waters, anything unusual means Japanese activity. Submarine, mine, or something worse. Slow to 5 knots. Prepare a recovery team. Nobody touches anything until we determine what the hell that is. Within the hour, the Archer's crew hauls the strange contraption aboard using grappling hooks, treating it like live ordnance. What emerges from the Pacific is unlike anything in Navy identification manuals. A balloon constructed of paper. Actual paper, they realize with disbelief, 33 feet across when inflated. Beneath it hangs a complex chandelier of sandbags, battery packs, and what explosive ordnance specialists immediately recognize as bomb mechanisms. The markings are unmistakably Japanese, but the implications defy logic. Japan lies 5,500 miles across the Pacific. No balloon could possibly cross that distance. The prevailing meteorological wisdom of 1944 holds that upper atmospheric winds are chaotic and unpredictable. Yet here floats evidence that challenges everything American scientists understand about long-range weapon delivery. Wallace orders the entire assembly carefully documented and transported under armed guard to Naval Intelligence in San Diego. Within 24 hours, similar reports begin filtering through military channels from up and down the West Coast. A rancher in Montana discovers strange paper and metal in his field. Royal Canadian Air Force pilots spot objects drifting at extreme altitude over British Columbia. Navy fighters scramble to intercept unidentified targets over Alaska that move faster than any aircraft. Royal Canadian Air Force pilots spot objects drifting at extreme altitude over British Columbia. Navy fighters scramble to intercept unidentified targets over Alaska that move faster than any aircraft. December 6, 1944. Near Thermopolis, Wyoming. The explosion shatters the winter silence at 8:35 in the morning. Francis Dick, working his land 3 miles outside town, sees the flash first, a brilliant white light that makes him flinch instinctively. The concussion follows seconds later, rolling across the frozen prairie like thunder. But the sky is clear. No storm, no aircraft, nothing that explains what just tore through the morning air. By the time Dick reaches the site, he finds a crater and scattered debris, paper fragments bearing Japanese characters, twisted metal, the unmistakable chemical smell of high explosives. He reports it to the county sheriff, who contacts the army. Within hours, military intelligence officers arrive to cordon off the area and collect every fragment. This is the pattern repeating across the American West through that brutal winter. Mysterious explosions. Strange balloons discovered in forests, caught in power lines, washing up on beaches. Each incident brings military investigators who arrive quickly, work methodically, and reveal nothing. The Army's technical intelligence teams begin assembling a picture that grows more disturbing with each recovery. The balloons are sophisticated. The paper envelope uses a lamination technique that makes it surprisingly strong. 4 layers bonded with vegetable paste that creates an airtight seal. The automatic ballast system represents engineering elegance. Barometric altimeters trigger sandbag releases every 2 hours to maintain optimal altitude. When hydrogen escapes through the pressure valve after 3 days aloft, a fuse mechanism arms the bombs for ground impact. But the most troubling revelation comes from meteorologists studying the flight patterns. The balloons are riding something the Japanese call higankaze, the river of heaven wind. A deep, steady narration with a calm but commanding tone, slightly gravelly, mature voice that carries the weight of wartime history. Clear, deliberate pacing, never rushed, allowing tension to build naturally. Subtle emotional restraint, controlled intensity during dramatic moments, quieter and reflective during tragic ones. Cinematic, documentary-style delivery, with precise emphasis on key names, dates, and actions. A voice that sounds authoritative, historical, and inevitable. American scientists know it as the jet stream, a phenomenon barely understood in 1944. The Japanese have not only discovered it, they've weaponized it. 3 days from launch to landfall, 9,000 miles across the Pacific at 30,000 feet, completely beyond the range of interceptor aircraft. By Christmas 1944, the War Department faces an unprecedented crisis, an enemy capability to strike the American homeland at will. Weapons that appear without warning, require no pilots, consume no fuel beyond the initial hydrogen charge, and the civilian population growing increasingly aware that something strange is happening. On December 29th, Byron Price, director of the Office of Censorship, issues a confidential request to every newspaper editor and radio station manager in America. Complete silence on the balloon bombs. No reports, no speculation. No acknowledgement that Japanese weapons are landing on American soil. The reasoning is twofold: prevent public panic and, more crucially, deny the Japanese any confirmation that their weapons are reaching North America. The media cooperation is nearly total. A few small-town papers run warnings to avoid suspicious objects, but major outlets comply completely. The blackout works so effectively that months later, when the deadliest balloon attack occurs, most Americans will learn about it only after the war ends. What the censors cannot control is the military's frantic response. By January 1945, the Western Defense Command organizes Operation Firefly, a massive firefighting and bomb disposal network stretching from Alaska to Mexico. They deploy 2,700 troops, including the 555th Parachute Infantry Battalion, the Army's first all-black airborne unit, trained specifically to parachute into remote forest fires. Stinson observation planes crisscross the western wilderness. Douglas C-47s stand ready to drop smoke jumpers at a moment's notice. The irony cuts deep. Japan's balloon offensive succeeds not through the fires it ignites, but through the resources it forces America to divert. Thousands of troops watching empty skies. Fighter pilots scrambling to intercept paper ghosts. An entire civil defense apparatus mobilized against an enemy that arrives silently, randomly, without warning. And still the balloons come, wave after wave through the winter months. 2,000 in January, 2,500 in February, another 2,500 in March. Each one a gamble riding the jet stream eastward, each one carrying enough explosive power to kill. May 5th, 1945, 10:15 a.m., near Bly, Oregon. Reverend Archie Mitchell turns the steering wheel of his Buick sedan off the main road, following the rutted track that winds up toward Gearhart Mountain. Spring has come late to southern Oregon this year, but this Saturday morning dawns clear and warm. the first genuinely pleasant day after weeks of rain. A deep, steady narration with a calm but commanding tone, slightly gravelly, mature voice that carries the weight of wartime history. Clear, deliberate pacing, never rushed, allowing tension to build naturally. Subtle emotional restraint, controlled intensity during dramatic moments, quieter and reflective during tragic ones. Cinematic, documentary-style delivery, with precise emphasis on key names, dates, and actions. A voice that sounds authoritative, historical, and inevitable. Perfect weather for the picnic his wife Elsie planned the night before, baking a chocolate cake while he prepared Sunday school lessons at their kitchen table. In the back seat, 5 children from their congregation chatter with the nervous energy of youth released from weekly routines. Edward Engine, 13. Jay Gifford, 13. Dick Patska, 14. His younger sister Joan, called Sis by everyone who knows her, 13. Sherman Shoemaker, 11. A deep, steady narration with a calm but commanding tone. Slightly gravelly, mature voice that carries the weight of wartime history. Clear, deliberate pacing, never rushed, allowing tension to build naturally. Subtle emotional restraint. Controlled intensity during dramatic moments. Quieter and reflective during tragic ones. Cinematic, documentary-style delivery, with precise emphasis on key names, dates, and actions. A voice that sounds authoritative, historical, and inevitable. Mitchell teaches them every Sunday at the Christian Missionary Alliance Church in Bly, a timber town of barely 300 souls tucked into the pine forests of the Fremont National Forest. Elsie, 26 and 5 months pregnant with their first child, had almost stayed home this morning. She'd been feeling unwell through the week. But the sunshine and her husband's enthusiasm changed her mind. Sometimes, Mitchell reflects as he navigates the rough road. You have to seize the good moments when they appear. The war in Europe ended 3 days ago. Germany's surrender dominates every newspaper, every radio broadcast. Perhaps, God willing, the Pacific War will end soon too, and they can return to the mission work in Korea they'd planned before Pearl Harbor changed everything. He parks the car in a small clearing at 10:20. "Stay together," he calls to the children as they pile out, already racing toward the tree line. "Don't wander too far. I'll get the picnic basket." Elsie follows them more slowly, one hand on her stomach, smiling at their excitement. The mountain air smells of pine sap and wildflowers. Somewhere, a jay calls, sharp and insistent. Beyond the trees, snow still clings to the higher slopes. Mitchell opens the trunk, reaching for the wicker basket Elsie packed. Then he hears his wife's voice, bright with curiosity. "Look what we found!" He turns. Elsie and all 5 children have gathered around something just inside the tree line, perhaps 70 feet from the car. A deflated white shape, half buried in dead pine needles. Metal fixtures gleam in the morning sun. Ropes trail across the forest floor. Later, in the agonizing reconstruction that follows, investigators will determine that this Fugo launched from Ichinomiya Beach on November 3, 1944, exactly 6 months and 2 days before this moment. It crossed the Pacific in 72 hours, riding the jet stream at 30,000 feet. The automatic ballast system functioned perfectly. The sandbags released on schedule. But when the hydrogen vented after 3 days and the fuse mechanism armed the bombs, something failed. Perhaps moisture in the barometric trigger. Perhaps frost at altitude. The bombs never released. The balloon drifted down through the spring sky and landed here, on Gearhart Mountain, its payload still live, still lethal, waiting through the winter months beneath snow and rain, waiting for someone to find it. Mitchell starts walking toward them, the picnic basket still in his hand. "Don't touch," he begins. The explosion tears the morning apart. The blast wave hits Mitchell like a physical punch, knocking him backward against the car. His ears ring. White smoke rolls through the trees. For a frozen instant, he cannot move, cannot breathe, cannot process what his eyes are showing him. Then he runs. All 6 lie scattered across the forest floor. The anti-personnel bomb, 33 pounds of high explosive packed with metal fragments designed to maximize human casualties, has done exactly what Japanese engineers intended. A deep, steady narration with a calm but commanding tone. Slightly gravelly, mature voice that carries the weight of wartime history. Clear, deliberate pacing, never rushed, allowing tension to build naturally. Subtle emotional restraint, controlled intensity during dramatic moments, quieter and reflective during tragic ones. Cinematic, documentary-style delivery, with precise emphasis on key names, dates, and actions. A voice that sounds authoritative, historical, and inevitable. Edward Engine, J. Gifford, Dick Patske, and Sherman Shoemaker died instantly. Elsie Mitchell and Joan Patske are still breathing, but barely. Blood soaks the pine needles. The sweet smell of explosive residue mixes with something worse. "No, no, God, please, no." Mitchell's voice breaks as he moves from body to body, his hands shaking, his mind refusing to accept what cannot be undone. He cradles Elsie's head. Her eyes flutter open for a moment. She tries to speak. Then she's gone. Joan follows minutes later. The silence that follows is absolute. No birds, no wind. Just Mitchell kneeling in the clearing, surrounded by the dead. His hands covered in blood. His entire world destroyed in a single instant. The chocolate cake Elsie baked sits in the picnic basket, untouched. The war in Europe ended 3 days ago. On Gearhart Mountain, the war has just claimed its final American victims, the only combat deaths on the continental United States during the entire Second World War. By nightfall, Army investigators will cordon off the site. By week's end, the War Department will finally break the media silence and announce the truth about Japan's balloon bombs. By summer, atomic fire will consume Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and Japan will surrender. But here, in this quiet Oregon forest, 6 lives ended because of a weapon launched 9,000 miles away, carried by wind and hydrogen, a ghost from a secret war that most Americans never knew existed. The Fugo campaign claimed its only fatalities, and the silence that surrounded them would last for decades. May 22nd, 1945. Washington, D.C. The War Department's press release hits newsrooms across America at 3 p.m. Eastern Wartime, finally breaking 6 months of enforced silence. Assistant Secretary of War John J. McCloy personally approves every word, conscious that he's revealing both a secret weapon and a national tragedy. The statement confirms what rural sheriffs, forest rangers, and Western Defense Command officers have known since November. Japan has been attacking North America with balloon-borne bombs carried across the Pacific by high-altitude winds. But the timing matters more than the content. Germany surrendered 17 days ago. The European war is won. The Pacific campaign grinds towards its inevitable, bloody conclusion, as American forces prepare for the invasion of Japan's home islands. A dense, steady narration with a calm but commanding tone, slightly gravelly, mature voice that carries the weight of wartime history. Clear, deliberate pacing, never rushed, allowing tension to build naturally. Subtle emotional restraint, controlled intensity during dramatic moments, quieter and reflective during tragic ones. Cinematic, documentary-style delivery, with precise emphasis on key names, dates, and actions. A voice that sounds authoritative, historical, and inevitable. Against this backdrop, the revelation that enemy weapons have been drifting silently across the American West for 6 months feels almost anticlimactic. Most newspapers bury the story on inside pages, overshadowed by headlines about the United Nations Conference in San Francisco and continuing operations in Okinawa. A voice that sounds authoritative, historical, and inevitable. The press release serves dual purposes, warning the public to avoid suspicious objects and, paradoxically, reassuring them that the attacks are so scattered and aimless that they constitute no military threat. It acknowledges the Bly deaths without dwelling on the gruesome details. 6 civilians killed. The only enemy action fatalities on continental United States soil during the entire war. A footnote to history, except for those who lived it. What the War Department doesn't reveal, cannot reveal without compromising intelligence operations, is that Japan already abandoned the Fugo campaign weeks before the Gerhardt Mountain explosion. By mid-April 1945, the Imperial Japanese Army faced crippling resource shortages. The kozo trees required for paper production were nearly exhausted. American B-29 raids had destroyed the Showa Denko chemical plant, strangling hydrogen supplies. More critically, the strict media censorship that so frustrated American security officials achieved its primary objective. Japan never learned whether the balloons reached North America. Japanese military planners, listening to American radio broadcasts and reading intercepted newspapers, heard nothing. No panic, no reports of forest fires, no casualties, no evidence whatsoever that 9,000 balloons accomplished anything beyond wasting increasingly precious resources. The propaganda broadcast by the Domei news agency on February 17th, claiming 500 or 10,000 casualties, was pure fabrication designed to boost morale at home. The reality was silence, the most effective weapon in America's defensive arsenal.
On August 6, 1945, 3 months after the WWII tragedy, the B-29 Enola Gay releases Little Boy over Hiroshima. 70,000 people die instantly. 3 days later, Nagasaki burns.
A deep, steady narration with a calm but commanding tone. Slightly gravelly, mature voice that carries the weight of wartime history. Clear, deliberate pacing, never rushed, allowing tension to build naturally. Subtle emotional restraint, controlled intensity during dramatic moments, quieter and reflective during tragic ones. Cinematic, documentary-style delivery with precise emphasis on key names, dates, and actions. A voice that sounds authoritative, historical, and inevitable. Japan surrenders on August 15th, and the Imperial Army immediately destroys all Fugo program records in compliance with surrender directives. Nearly everything American investigators later learn about the balloon campaign comes from a single interview with Lieutenant Colonel Teratoko Kunitake and a Major Inouye, who confirm what forensic analysis already suggested. The balloons were a desperate gamble that failed. The final count takes years to compile. Of roughly 9,300 balloons launched between November 1944 and April 1945, approximately 300 reached North America, barely 3%. Most fell into the Pacific or drifted off course. Those that landed caused minimal damage. The feared forest fires never materialized because winter conditions left forests too damp to burn. The psychological warfare value evaporated under the media blackout. Yet the Fugo campaign achieved something its designers never intended. It became the world's first intercontinental weapon system, predating intercontinental ballistic missiles by more than a decade. It proved that attacks on the continental United States were possible, even with 1940s technology. And it killed 6 innocent people on a spring morning in Oregon, their names now inscribed on a memorial at the Mitchell Recreation Area near Bly. Elsie Mitchell, Edward Engine, J. Gifford, Joan Patskey, Richard Patskey, Sherman Shoemaker. The War Department's final technical report, prepared by Carl T. Compton and Edward L. Moreland and submitted to President Truman, runs 5 volumes. It catalogs every recovered balloon, every fragment, every chemical analysis. But it cannot answer the questions that haunt Archie Mitchell for the rest of his life, or explain why a weapon launched from a beach in Japan ended 6 lives in an Oregon forest. The Fugo balloons drift into obscurity, a secret war within the larger war, remembered primarily by those who lived through it and the families who lost everything. The Fugo balloons drift into obscurity, a secret war within the larger war, remembered primarily by those who lived through it and the families who lost everything. A deep, steady narration with a calm but commanding tone. Slightly gravelly, mature voice that carries the weight of wartime history. Clear, deliberate pacing, never rushed, allowing tension to build naturally. Subtle emotional restraint, controlled intensity during dramatic moments, quieter and reflective during tragic ones. Cinematic, documentary-style delivery with precise emphasis on key names, dates, and actions. A voice that sounds authoritative,
historical, and inevitable. September 12, 1992. Mitchell Recreation Area, near Bly, Oregon. The granite monument stands in quiet testimony beneath the ponderosa pines, its polished surface reflecting the late summer sun. Archie Mitchell, now 82 years old, places his weathered hand on the stone, his fingers tracing names carved 47 years earlier. Elsie Mitchell, Edward Engine, J. Gifford, Joan Potskey, Richard Potskey, Sherman Shoemaker. He comes here every year on the anniversary, though the date etched in his memory is May 5th, not September. But today brings visitors, journalists, historians, a documentary crew trying to resurrect a story that most Americans never learned. The Fugo campaign remains one of World War II's most obscure chapters, a footnote buried in classified files and fading memories. A deep, steady narration with a calm but commanding tone, slightly gravelly, mature voice that carries the weight of wartime history, clear, deliberate pacing, never rushed, allowing tension to build naturally, subtle emotional restraint, controlled intensity during dramatic moments, quieter and reflective during tragic ones, cinematic, documentary-style delivery with precise emphasis on key names, dates, and actions, a voice that sounds authoritative, historical, and inevitable. Mitchell speaks slowly, choosing his words with the precision of a man who has told this story countless times, yet never found adequate language for the horror. They were just children, he says quietly, excited about a picnic, curious about something they found in the woods. He doesn't mention the blood, the screaming silence that followed the explosion, the chocolate cake that remained in the picnic basket while 6 lives ended in an instant. Some details are too private for public consumption, even after nearly 5 decades. The irony cuts deeper with each passing year. Japan's balloon offensive failed by every conventional military measure. Only 3% of 9,000 balloons reached North America, starting no significant fires, causing no panic, tying down minimal resources once the war ended. Yet it succeeded in ways the Imperial Army never imagined. It killed American civilians on continental soil, the only enemy action to do so during the entire war. It disrupted the Manhattan Project when a balloon entangled power lines at Hanford, briefly shutting down the plutonium production reactors that would ultimately create the bomb dropped on Nagasaki. And it pioneered intercontinental warfare, proving that distance no longer guaranteed homeland security. The technological legacy persists. The Fugo's automatic ballast system, crude by modern standards, represented a quantum leap in unmanned weapon delivery. Engineers studying recovered balloons marveled at the elegant simplicity. Barometric altimeters triggering sandbag releases, pressure valves regulating hydrogen, clockwork fuses arming payloads after precisely calculated flight times. The paper envelope construction, dismissed as primitive, actually demonstrated sophisticated understanding of material science. 4 layers of mulberry paper, bonded with konjaku root paste, created an airtight seal strong enough to survive 3 days at 30,000 feet and temperatures dropping to -60 degrees Fahrenheit. But the true genius, and the element that guaranteed failure, was the weaponization of the jet stream itself. Japanese meteorologists discovered what American scientists barely understood in 1944.
A deep, steady narration with a calm but commanding tone. Slightly gravelly, mature voice that carries the weight of wartime history. Clear, deliberate pacing, never rushed, allowing tension to build naturally. Subtle emotional restraint, controlled intensity during dramatic moments, quieter and reflective during tragic ones. Cinematic, documentary-style delivery, with precise emphasis on key names, dates, and actions. A voice that sounds authoritative, historical, and inevitable. High-altitude winds flowing west to east across the Pacific at speeds exceeding 200 miles per hour during winter months. The balloons rode this atmospheric river with remarkable precision, crossing 6,000 miles in 72 hours without pilots, navigation systems, or fuel beyond the initial hydrogen charge. The campaign's termination in April 1945 came not from military defeat, but resource exhaustion and information starvation. The kozo tree forests were depleted.
A deep, steady narration, with a calm but commanding tone. Slightly gravelly, mature voice that carries the weight of wartime history. Clear, deliberate pacing, never rushed, allowing tension to build naturally. Subtle emotional restraint, controlled intensity during dramatic moments, quieter and reflective during tragic ones. Cinematic, documentary-style delivery, with precise emphasis on key names, dates, and actions. A voice that sounds authoritative, historical, and inevitable. American bombing destroyed hydrogen production facilities. Most critically, the media blackout worked perfectly. Japan never learned their weapons were reaching America, never heard about the deaths at WWII, never received confirmation that justified continuing the offensive. Silence became America's most effective defense. Today, unexploded Fugo bombs still surface occasionally in the forests and mountains of the American West.
A deep, steady narration with a calm but commanding tone. Slightly gravelly, mature voice that carries the weight of wartime history. Clear, deliberate pacing, never rushed, allowing tension to build naturally. Subtle emotional restraint, controlled intensity during dramatic moments, quieter and reflective during tragic ones. Cinematic, documentary-style delivery with precise emphasis on key names, dates, and actions. A voice that sounds authoritative, historical, and inevitable. Military ordnance disposal teams respond to reports of strange paper fragments, rusted chandelier assemblies, degraded sandbags bearing Japanese characters. Each discovery carries lethal potential. The high explosives remain viable. The fuses still functional after 8 decades buried in wilderness. Archie Mitchell steps back from the monument as shadows lengthen through the pines. The journalists ask their questions. The camera records his answers. But some truths resist documentation. The weight of a pregnant wife's head cradled in blood-stained hands. the silence that follows an explosion, the knowledge that curiosity killed 6 innocent people because nations chose war over peace. The Fugo balloons have vanished into history, remembered primarily by aging veterans, ordnance disposal experts, and a handful of families who lost everything on a spring morning in Oregon. The weight of a pregnant wife's head cradled in blood-stained hands. The silence that follows an explosion. The knowledge that curiosity killed 6 innocent people because nations chose war over peace. The Fugo balloons have vanished into history, remembered primarily by aging veterans, ordnance disposal experts, and a handful of families who lost everything on a spring morning in Oregon. But their legacy endures, a reminder that distance provides no sanctuary, that warfare recognizes no boundaries, and that the innocent always pay the highest price for conflicts they never chose. The monument stands. The names remain carved in stone. And somewhere in the forests of the American West, unexploded ghosts still wait beneath the pines, silent sentinels of a secret war most Americans never knew existed.